Good evening. I'm Cory Morgan. Welcome to the Western Standards, The Pipeline. This is the weekly panel show where we hit on the top news issues and dissect them with a few of our personalities from the Western Standard newsroom. And we've got a few good ones to cover tonight. I'm going to start, though, by getting the important things out of the way as well and talk about one of our sponsors, because this is why we can do this show and this is how we stay independent, folks. One of our best sponsors, they've been around for a long time, is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. If you are interested in taking part with firearms, if you have firearms, you enjoy firearms, or you just respect the rights of others to have firearms, you need to be a member of this association, guys. It's got all sorts of resources on their site, actually, for everything from upcoming firearms shows to sporting events, but as well, they lobby on your behalf as a firearms owner, because there is a government that's trying to take away your right to have these. If you don't stand up for yourself, you will lose your rights. So check them out. Google it, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, or go to the website. You can see on the screen there, CSSA-CILA.org. Check them out, and you'll see it's well worth taking out a membership and investing in yourself. Okay, before we get into the subjects, I'll introduce who I'm sitting with tonight. I'll start on the far end, actually, since he's not always here as one of our panelists, our news editor, Mr. Dave Naylor. How's it going, Dave?
Good. Back by popular demand, I hope.
Yes. We were just overwhelmed with fan mail with your absence last week. And our opinion editor, Mr. Nigel Hannaford.
Full of opinions as usual.
Well, he'd best be. It's pretty dull if we wouldn't put those forth, but they're always well received. Even if not always agreed
not
with.
Always, actually.
Well,
no, it's,
we just, shuffle through the responses, the emails, and
we have our ways.
Pick which we like and which we don't. We got some stuff to share some opinions on tonight, though. Big one. I mean, this is obviously going to be a large part of Premier Smith's entire tenure in office. She's taking on the big one. She's taking on healthcare. This is something that I think makes most premiers, break out in a cold sweat at the prospect of dealing with. I mean, it's Canada's sacred cow, that healthcare system that nobody's allowed to do anything with aside from injecting more money into it and perhaps, further entrenching the inability to change anything with. So she came out with a large release today, as the title says, creative destruction at Alberta Health Services. So she's not taking a minor approach to things. She's diving right in. Maybe Dave, I'll start with kind of the news end, though. What did you gather from the conference today?
No, she promised to do it and said she would, and she did today. I can't take my glasses off dramatically like Nigel does because I wouldn't be able to see my notes. But basically, AHS doesn't exist anymore. It's probably better known as Alberta Hospital Services as opposed to Alberta Health Services. Under the restructuring, AHS is only going to be responsible for hospitals and acute care. And they've set up a whole bunch of different other cylinders. They've got one on continuing care, and they're basically going to be looking at seniors' homes, and they're going to be solely in care of them. They're going to be a primary care network, which is basically their goal is to link every Albertan with a family doctor. And there's going to be a separate mental health addiction silo. And they're going to be focused on what they call recovery-oriented care. Now, the entire Alberta Health Services Board was fired earlier. They named a new head today, Lyle Oberg, who was a former education minister back in the day. And back in the day, Nigel, you'll remember it was Oberg who fired Daniel Smith as a Calgary School Board trustee. So I guess it's one thing that shows Smith doesn't hold a grudge.
Certainly does. And,
so a massive reorganization today, and this is what the Daniel Smith government will be judged on in 4 years' time when they go back to the polls, or in 3.5 years' time. She campaigned on it. She delivered. Didn't take long for the NDP to say the world is ending. And the NDP was joined by the likes of Gil McGowan, who also predicted the end of civilization as we know it because of this, and the AUPE. Doctors, they said as long as we're getting consulted and have a big say in what's going on, they'd be okay with it. But as usual, it's the usual suspects complaining and the usual proponents proponing. If that's a word.
Right. Well, so Nigel, I mean, speaking of political capital, I mean, this is a big investment. I mean, there's no going back once you're ready to try and take on the behemoth of healthcare. Premier Smith doesn't appear to be afraid to dive right in. I mean, I imagine this is going to be the first step of a lot of work she's going to do in the next few years.
I would say, well, it's, after the energy security thing, this is the biggest thing on her plate, no question about it. And just sort of going back 20 years when I was on the editorial board at the Calgary Herald with her, she was very aware of all that anyway. This is something that she's wanted to address, because Alberta Health has always been this massive, it's like the oil tanker that takes like 10 miles to turn around. It's huge, it's monstrous, it doesn't respond very well to the touch of the wheel. And, bureaucracies everywhere. If you ever watch that show, Yes, Minister, you're with me, all right?
Yes.
It's one of those where sometimes they do some good work, but basically it responds to the priorities and the interests of the people at the top of the pyramid. And that, of course, is one reason why she got rid of the board last year. It wasn't working efficiently in her judgment. I think she was probably right. But you're still left with this oil tanker, and now she has one captain in the person of Dr. Cowell instead of a committee trying to steer it. Well, that was helpful. But in the end, it's just too big to focus and get the job done. So she's breaking it up into four in the way that Dave described. But, the problem for anybody, whether it was Danielle Smith or whether it had been somebody else who wants to reform that agency, is that the unions have it by the throat. And you'll notice that the AUPE spokesman who came out shortly afterwards and said, the world is ending, AUPE President Guy Smith, responding right afterwards, he said, the Alberta government, here's the solution from the unions. The Alberta government should implement wage increases. Okay. Focus on greater job security. So if people aren't performing very well, you can't get rid of them. And improve staffing levels. Well, thanks. That was helpful. These are the very reasons. We got to find a way to do more with less. And probably is going to mean it ought to mean that a lot of administrative jobs would get kicked out and the money reallocated to people who can actually put a sticking plaster on a wound. Frontline workers.
Well, that's something that's been said a long, long time. I mean, it's always been the buzzword. They always couch it with Premier Kenney used to always say that too. It's the frontline workers. It's the frontline workers. But they were always afraid to actually take on the behemoth that was the administration. And this is different. I mean, it used to be regional boards. So when I heard, the plan was to break it up, I kind of thought maybe she's going back to that, which I thought it's mixed. I mean, we've already been there. But no, this is different. It's breaking it into different specialties, which I think leaves a lot more room to give your rationale to say, okay, you don't fit into the current model. You've got to go away. You don't fit. I know I'm not celebrating the loss of jobs of people, but we know there's been a lot of inefficiency, and we could probably do without a heck of a lot of those people who are in that bureaucracy. This is perhaps a bit of a.
The premier stressed today that there would probably be no frontline job losses, but how many vice presidents did the AH have? Like 27, 28, something like that, if not higher. Ironically, I had a visit this morning with my family doctor, who did unspeakable things to me, Nigel. I just won't
speak no more.
No, I'm not going to speak of it anymore. I'm still traumatized. But,
your knuckles are still a little white.
A little white, yeah.
Come on, Dave. You don't even like going to the dentist.
No, I don't. And no cavities, by the way. I'll say that for my British teeth. But I find that once you get into the system, there's no better system in the world. Once you get an appointment with your specialist or whatnot, but you getting into the system is too difficult for a lot of Albertans. And I think that's what some of these changes are aimed at doing. So AHS as they were, doesn't have to deal with the mental crisis. They just have to deal with, delivering acute healthcare.
Yeah.
And as long as they can focus on that, it can't help but improve, surely.
I'm not sure I 100% agree with you about there is no better system once you get into it. First of all, you are correct that getting into it is difficult. Well, you're into it once you see your general practitioner who says, yes, you've got something, I need to refer you to a specialist. Oh, when would that be? Next week? Oh, no.
No, it's down the road, no doubt.
It's going to be a long time. And once you get to the specialist who's, taking appointments for 6 months out, and please don't do this, ladies and gentlemen. I know there are some of you who will be saying, 6 months, what are you talking about? It was 9 months from GP. It was a year from GP to specialist. We know. I was trying to be generous. But once you get to the specialist, well, then you're looking at another lengthy period of time. So there should be, I noticed that there are other countries where this is not the case. And they're not all the sort of the socialist utopias that you might expect. Some of them are pretty hard-nosed countries but they found a way to get it done. That's what we need to do in Alberta, is find a way to get it done.
Yeah, and it's certainly it's the province's biggest expense,
Yes.
And we're not getting any better outcomes than other jurisdictions. I know Cory's talked about it on his show that you look over, there are other ways of doing it that seem to produce better outcomes.
Well, there certainly are, and the one that struck me as the most likely to be effective was the one that Ralph Klein, God rest his soul, Ralph Klein did a lot of good things, but he brought in Bill 11.
The third wave.
That meant that you couldn't start a private hospital in Alberta. We should have opened the gates to private healthcare, brought them in, and then had a bidding war to get the procedures done that needed to be done. When I was traveling some years ago, I ended up in Jordan, of all places, and driving down the street, I couldn't help noticing the hospital, clinic. That little country has built itself up an enviable reputation as the place to go to get treated quickly. Jordan, you wouldn't think so, would you? But there it was. And they drew their trade from all over the Middle East and Europe. And they've done exactly what we should have done in Alberta. They have attracted the medical profession to come and set up right there. And now, of course,
same things happened in Mexico with dental work.
Algodones.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. I mean, you just across the border and you see nothing but dental clinics.
So
and you see nothing but Canadians lined up in front of them.
That's right. And it's not that our dental service is so bad. I mean, you make an appointment, you go in, you get done, but it's just that it costs you about 3 times what it cost you, and you can have a holiday for what you save on the trip to Mexico, so they tell me. One other thing, though, Dave. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say we've started the process, but it's like drip. Where okay, now you can go to a private clinic and get your eyes done, or your knees done, or your hips done, and it all gets billed back to Alberta Healthcare Services. And in theory, that should shorten the wait list for everybody else. Doesn't seem to have cut it tremendously, but you're right. If we'd have done what instead of Bill 11, done the opposite and attracted private hospitals, we would have been in a lot better position than we are now.
One thing, though, Cory, I mean, I guess we all remember Lyle Oberg from that's a good man. I have some confidence in this, knowing that he is the point of the spear on this now. Yeah. And I remember one thing about Lyle that, I mean, it shouldn't matter, but somehow it does. This was the guy, he was an MLA at the time, driving to Edmonton, comes across a road accident, gets out, somebody's, in serious condition as a consequence. He's a doctor. Gets out, he does what doctors do, fixes the guy. Actually, he did what first aid people do, but got the fellow stabilized and into an ambulance and on the way to where he could be properly looked after. And there's something about that ability to be hands-on, if you have to be, that to me gives, there's a certain amount of confidence in having somebody who can do that and respond quickly to an emergency, sitting at the point of the spear on Alberta Health.
Yeah, and the Twitter reaction today has noted that he's a proponent of private health
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
good
I
to-
believe it was a Vietnamese clinic he was involved in at some time in the past, or something like that. I could be stand to be corrected on that, but he'd done other work once he'd left government on things like that, because people, I mean, that's part of the reality of what's happening. It's not just the rich seeking care outside of the borders; it's the desperate. It's people, somebody say, "Oh, you need this heart procedure within 4 months, or there's a 50% chance you'll die. We'll schedule you in for 6 months from now." Well, person in that circumstance, they're going to refinance their house. They're going to borrow from friends and family. They're going to sell the household dog, whatever they have to do, and they'll go somewhere else and
Don't
get
sell
it.
the dog.
Well, yeah, it depends on the dog. I got one as a real jerk. But,
Not the wonder dog.
not Duke, no. But either way, people are leaving, and the dollars are fleeing. I mean, there's some of the things that I think the purists with our public system need to understand. The two tiers are already there. Why not keep the dollars here? Why not keep the specialists here? But can we get to that with the drip, 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 as Dave said, or does Daniel Smith need to get in there and rip that Band-Aid off and let's have this fight? Because it's going to be a fight. They're going to battle every possible private inclusion of anything provision-wise on every front.
Well, it's interesting when you look at the proposed timing of this. He's doing some things as soon as this spring, and then it's in the fall, and then it's 2024. So ripping off the Band-Aid, terrible pun given the nature of the discussion, Cory.
I used plaster earlier. I wasn't sure if all of our viewers would understand that.
But, this is going to be tough, and she's getting it done early in her mandate. And hopefully, hopefully for her, but hopefully for all of us, she can make this thing work the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, and then
it's not going to be an election issue in 2027.
Exactly. And then in 2027, if she wants to campaign on ripping that Band-Aid off, that would be something that she consider. And she can look back and say, these are the successes that we've had, hopefully.
And we're seeing some political tactics. Another name that she added to her list of people, I saw Stelmach coming up in there as well, former Premier Stelmach. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's showing that she's willing to bring in a coalition of people that she differed quite strongly with before. Yes, Oberg fired her and Pollock and the rest from the dysfunctional school board.
It was Premier Stelmach who brought in the super board, who got rid of the regionalized healthcare authorities. And he was asked today, you set up this big thing. And he basically said, yeah, it's just grown too big. It was a good idea at the time in 2008, but it's grown into a monolith now that is like your proverbial oil tanker.
Yeah.
It's got to be split up.
And that might calm some of the red Tory element, I guess you could say. And we'll tie that in when we talk in our next subject pretty quickly as well, because you got a party that still has some that are clinging to the progressive conservative notion of things, and some who still self-identify perhaps as Wild Rose. Premier Stelmach was most certainly of the progressive conservative past. I mean, so having him on board is keeping those members realizing she's getting input from more.
Well, to that end, it's sort of interesting that she reached out to Jim Dinning on the Alberta pension plan. I mean, it's like everybody who ever did an editorial board with the Calgary Herald has now been put to work in the Alberta government. It's just,
well, they're going to be lining up trying to get in for what's left of the editorial board of the Herald.
Well, yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
I don't think they have an editorial board, do they?
No, but she's relying on people that she's known in the past.
Yes, that's connections. Well, that's the nature of.
And they're mostly people who are pretty high profile in their time. So it's kind of nice to see how that's coming along.
Yeah, they're experienced connections. I mean, it's not a case of nepotism. It's her second cousin from over here, or somebody who helped on a campaign over there. These are well established, figures within Alberta with some experience under there.
Yeah, as mentioned, Oberg fired her.
Yeah. She got over things.
Yeah.
So let's turn and go to where we spent last weekend, which was at the United Conservative Party AGM, the first one since Daniel Smith got elected as premier in the general election. Huge, 3,700 and change attendees. And I think from my perspective and on the ground, for that many people, it went off quite well.
Biggest Canadian political convention in history, 3,700 people. It was incredible. All the women coming up to Cory and
he was magnificent.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It was
that deodorant I was wearing. It's irresistible.
She gave the keynote
sponsorship.
The keynote speech on Saturday, where Alberta will be the shining light on the hill.
City on the hill.
And biggest applause that she got, a thunderous standing ovation, was when she said that she would be standing up for parent rights. And the one of the proposals of 30 on the weekend was that parents have the right to know before teachers start changing genders on kids at school, and I think that passed utterly unanimously. And it was certainly the rest of the resolutions were about giving more power to individuals and to parents. And I think every single one of them except school vouchers passed. So it, David Parker, Take Back Alberta, he's certainly taking the credit for it. He got his person elected as party chairman or party president, whatever the position is, and beat Rick Orman quite handily. So yeah, I think it was a hugely successful weekend, both for Take Back Alberta and for Danielle Smith and the UCP.
Well, I 100% agree with you on that it was a tremendous success for her. But now she actually has to act on that thunderous applause that you described. And it was kind of, we went up to the presser afterwards, and she was asked about that. And she kind of got a little bit, from my point of view anyway, she got a little bit watering her wine a bit when she said, well, yes, but we, obviously that's what we think, but we have to balance other interests. And, our columnist, John Hilton O'Brien, jumped right on that and said, look, when you're talking about parental rights, who are the other stakeholders that you have to balance the interests with? Surely not the teachers, and surely not the advocates for things that you don't agree with. Now, you're right. She did get massive, thunderous applause. Those same people will turn on her if she does not deliver what they thought she was delivering at that very moment.
To be clear, none of these resolutions are binding on the government. They're sort of guiding principles.
That is true.
And she, at that press conference, she was asked if she would bring in legislation similar to what Saskatchewan has done, protecting parents' rights. And you're right. She does not want to get involved in this because it's such a political hot potato with the activists on the left. So she didn't commit to bringing in legislation. And as she said, she's got to be premier for the entire province, not just the 3,700 UCP members.
I can get why she just wouldn't want to touch it at all. I mean, it's just a hot button, but it's perilous. And as Nigel was kind of hinting at, and of course, Mr. Parker is always happy to point out, he'll rip her down just as quickly and fast if she doesn't move ahead with the agenda as he has taken part in, at least contributed towards with Premier Kenney in the past or members of the board. It's a threat that sits there. I mean, to find the balance, you can't let yourself be wagged by TBA, but at the same time, when the members have been so clear on at least one subject,
yes,
she should throw that red meat to them. I mean, that's one of the ones that's been polled quite often. That seems to be where the activists and the unions overstepped. When this is going to public polls, even left-leaning people tend to say, no, my relationship between my children is between me and my child, not the teacher and my child, not the principal and my child, not that activist and my child. It's myself. And that's where they're trying to shoehorn themselves. I mean, we saw that Toronto Star piece. It was just odious. It was basically saying parents don't have the right to raise their children. And people, they're saying, who's ever questioning your right to raise your children? Lots of people are. They're doing it every day, actually. And the teachers' unions are behind that push.
It wouldn't surprise me to see Premier Scott Moe call an early election, specifically on this issue, because he is getting a lot of pushback from the lefts and the unions, and despite the fact that all the polls show it's overwhelmingly supported by Canadians. So here's my prediction: look for Scott Moe to call an early election on it.
That'd be a good one to dig up the archives of this one if that happens, because that's quite a prediction.
Just don't tell Derek. There'll be another pool on the glass
on
door
the glass
over
walls.
there.
Exactly.
When will
they call
an
the election?
Yeah. No, to be fair to Danielle Smith, I think that she actually does have very genuine libertarian tendencies, and then you would understand.
Oh, yes, that's very much we're on very similar pages politically.
So she would take the view that, look, I mean, you have to let people be what they are. But what the parents were applauding and what the parents are absolutely sure they don't want is somebody else trying to tell the kids what they should be. Anecdotal evidence is always dangerous, as we know. But in the context of this discussion, I was just relating, a parent told me that there was the class that their grandchildren were in. Everybody was happy at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, half of them were confused. So something is going on, because, you know, we all remember what it was like in school. We were confused about a lot of things, but never about this.
It was usually algebra.
It was usually algebra. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, look, she's the premier is definitely riding a tiger on this one, in my view, and we'll have to see how she deals with it. But if she decides to follow the line of Scott Moe, she's not going to make any mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard stories about how kids en masse in certain classes are all of a sudden deciding they're not the gender that they were born.
Yeah.
So we have to accept that activism is alive and well in the Canadian school system. And it's only going to be through legislation that stops it, in my opinion.
Well, and I think it can be read both ways. And I do believe moderate, rational people, some that still wouldn't vote UCP, for example, still as parents, wouldn't like it if in the classroom that their child was taught by a very socially conservative teacher. And perhaps the child confided to the teacher saying, I think I might be gay. I'm having feelings towards, people of the same gender as myself. And that teacher cracked down and said, absolutely not. You're wrong. You're going to burn in hell. Taking that stance with the child, that's another violation, getting between the parent and the child on something that's very personal. And, I'm just saying that this can cut both ways. I think most people can support just parental authority, even though some parents will screw it up at times. Is still paramount. I mean, it shouldn't be that complicated.
But Cory, let's say that a parent does screw it up. There is a way of dealing with it. You have a child complains to their teacher that mom and dad are against them in this area. Okay, there are authorities who you can go to, and the investigation can be launched and see who said what unto whom. And under certain circumstances, you can have a criminal prosecution. Depends what we're investigating. What you shouldn't have is a little quiet pipeline that doesn't involve the parents at all, where they never get a chance to answer for what they're being charged with. And it just takes the child away in a totally different direction, and nobody even knows.
Well, and they're impressionable. I mean, it's a turning point for kids, particularly when you get 12 to 16. You're pissed off at the world, often your parents. You're finding yourself. You're rebelling against. You're not even sure what yet, but you're ticked off at it. And yes, you can be led in strange directions. I think right now it's a fad. I want to stand out. I want to look different. It used to be a kid dyeing his hair purple or putting a clothespin through his ear. Now it's, I'm going to change my gender. But I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many of the ones identifying right now, once they hit 18, 19, are still identifying as trans, or perhaps have settled back into.
Well, that will be interesting, Cory. But the problem is that if there aren't some brakes on all of this, some of them may have done things that are going to.
Well, that's the biggest concern: is the irreversible things such as transitioning, puberty blockers, and or even surgical intervention.
That's why we need to stop this activism. And I think the pendulum is now starting to swing backwards, slowly but surely.
They overshot, I think. That's what I mean, is people, I think, instinctively, again, even if you're a far left person, it's you and your children. You've taken on that role. Most people take that very seriously, and they want to instill what they feel are their morals and values, and hopefully, good concepts upon the children. We can differ on what the parents feel is appropriate or not, but very few of them want another authority to get between them and their kids. As strongly as they might feel about unions or activists, wait a minute, that's me and the child, not you guys getting in there. So if it turns into a storm, it probably will, whether she likes it or not. Premier Smith's very smart. She should be able to navigate these waters. I think she'd be less clumsy, perhaps, than Premier Moe with the whole thing, and he's been faring quite well with this, actually.
Yeah, and there was a big protest outside the UCP convention. I think 10, 11 people.
Maybe even a dozen, yeah.
You think 12? Okay, I couldn't take my shoes off to count. So because I failed algebra. I'm not very good in math. So yeah, it's a vocal minority, but a minority they are.
Yeah. I think the other thing about that convention was that she felt free to talk the language of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. I mean, you were talking about the city on the hill. Well, that's actually a Ronald Reagan quote, and I don't think it was original to him. But the point was that he brought it forward again, and that was his vision of America. And Danielle Smith has a vision of Alberta as being an extremely attractive place for people to come to. She's talking about massive population growth, but she uses words like freedom. When did you last hear a politician talking about freedom in the sense of personal uplifting freedom as opposed to freedom to be a victim? You know, she's really elevating the tone of the conversation.
And it was a short but somewhat punchy speech. It was only 20 minutes. You know, sometimes those could, I think Premier Smith, Kenny used to go for a good 40, 45 often. I'd be getting sore back by the time it was going. But I mean, she was unapologetically conservative in it, which was refreshing. I mean, she came out of the gates calling out socialists, unions, and then putting out, kind of a little bit of a poke at them. We won.
Yes.
So do you think we have another Maggie or Ron on our hands in the making?
Well, time will tell.
We'll see when the battle begins. I mean, it's one thing to start the fight. It's winning it is when you'll see whether, you've got somebody ready to take on the air traffic controllers or the other strikers. Because that's where the battle is. It's the unions. There's no getting around it. That's the bastion. That's where the strength of Rachel Notley has been. And somebody needs to take them on rather than catering to them all the time.
Yeah, no, this is as in health, so in education. These are the two big areas where they've become totally dug in.
Which is interesting because, I mean, one of the most effective ways perhaps to defuse the unions might have been a full-out voucher system, and that's the only policy that failed.
Yeah, I was surprised by that, actually. I thought that might pass, but it failed. It was a close vote. I think it was the only one that they actually had to count by hand because all the other ones were so overwhelmingly for the affirmative side. But yeah, I was surprised it got voted down.
But as you said before, whichever way the vote goes, it doesn't bind the government.
No, exactly. They can still bring it in if they want.
Smith wants a voucher system. She can bring that in.
Yeah, and they're doing it sort of differently.
Everybody knows what a voucher system is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, your average person probably doesn't dig much in.
So, I mean, very briefly, the government is going to spend a certain amount of money on your child's education. So you just go to the nearest school. Well, another method of saying, okay, your education is going to be worth this much. Take this chit, go to the school you like, give it to them, send your kid there, and the school will turn the chit in to get paid. There are some schools who would do very well on that, and there are some that would be deeply and sorely embarrassed. And I think it's because of the danger of sore embarrassment that the education system, which hates to be measured anyway, is very, very against this. But there are certainly some schools that, if they're doing a good job, why not put a little force behind them?
And I think there was the suggestion that they would maybe take a look at starting it with daycares and send the money for daycare to the follow the child, so to speak. See how that works, and then maybe expand it into the school system.
Competition. I mean, letting parents vote with their voucher would, certainly. But that's what I mean is in a way to take on the unions, because one of the problems with the heavily unionized environment is you'll get some teachers. I mean, some are probably worth twice what they're being compensated. I mean, it's a tough, important job. It's an art that I can greatly admire those that can do it well. But we know there's always some who are just mailing it in as well for a good pension. And if a school's been overrun by the second bunch, they're not going to get many students, and the unions know that and they fear that. Likewise with standardized testing, that's always one of the biggest things they love to fight. Don't you dare test those kids, because we might actually start to see which educators are effective and which aren't. But that's a saying that we should stop weighing kids, because then we'll find out which are obese and which aren't. I mean, you can't treat the problem until you test.
You know, Cory, we got a great column running on Friday. I think it's Friday. Murray Lytle, anyway, writes for us down then. And he's an engineer. He was actually a commissioner on the National Energy Board. But he went through a patch where he was looking for a job, and he decided, well, maybe I should take my engineering credentials and go be a teacher. And, would you like would you like your kids taught by somebody who was a professional, had the kahunas to get a professional engineer and become that, and to know how to put a pipeline together, like that kind of expertise and knowledge? What happened, and he describes it in the article that, like I say, I think it's coming out on Friday. They wanted him to take a 2-year course to become a teacher. And this, of course, is the 2-year course where the teachers get indoctrinated into the union mentality and the union set of priorities and the woke way that they want to teach the kids. And it would be one of the better things that the education system could do, in my view, is to make it easier for accomplished professionals who had something to offer to engage in the education system, whether it was for a 1-year sabbatical or whether it was for a career midlife crisis, whatever it was. Let people who have real knowledge of the hard world in which we live come in and educate kids if they have a wish to do so. Anyway, check it out.
Looking
Friday.
forward to reading that one. Yes.
Yep, Murray Lytle on Friday.
Absolutely. Okay, well, and things that broke. Yesterday I saw that pop up. I didn't expect it. I didn't know it was coming. It sounds like we've got quite a celebrity appearance coming, Dave, and our premier is going to be sitting down with it.
We did. It wasn't a surprise to us, but we were able to keep the secret. Tucker Carlson coming to town. Is it next January or February?
January the 24th.
January 24th. Arguably the biggest media star in the world today. As you know, he got fired from Fox, and that's going to cost him hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm sure. And he set up shop on Twitter, where his shows get tens of millions of viewers every single time. It's ratings that Cory can only dream of, Nigel.
Got a ways to go, yeah.
Got a ways to go. Yeah, he's going to be coming to Calgary for a thing at the convention center. He's going to be a moderator, Brett Wilson, Calgary businessman and philanthropist, and guest on Cory's show regularly. And he's going to be sitting down and chatting with Premier Daniel Smith. So the ink had not dried on my enter button when I published the story that left-wing heads were exploding all over the country, led by our friend Gil McGowan again. The world is ending, Gil. Followed quickly by Rachel Notley, or it might have been vice versa. Rachel Notley saying that the world was ending, but it was the left-wing media too that were jumping all over it, led by the Globe and Mail's Kelly Kreiderman and Andrew Coyne, who called out Premier Smith for daring to sit down with this right-wing individual who holds controversial comments. And what is Daniel Smith thinking? So. Just typical, Nigel. Typical.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, first of all, that event is going to be sold out by the end of the week. It's not until January, but that is going to go so fast that if you are thinking of getting a ticket, by the way, we are a sponsor, are we not?
And we are offering a VIP package to members.
And we are offering a VIP package to our members, so let's not forget that. But if you have any, I would say that if anybody had any wish to go to that, they better get their name in right away, or else get very tight with somebody who's bought a table already. So that's
enter our draw, become a member.
Or enter our draw, and well, they're already winners if they are.
They are
Western Standard. But now there's
a benefit beyond being instilled with direct
absolutely.
access to all our fine writings.
You know, for a person like Danielle Smith, the opportunity to sit down with Jordan Peterson, as she did, to be on, what is it, this hour has 22 minutes yesterday, and chat things over, hang out with Tucker Carlson. Boy, I would say that alone would justify all the effort that she went into becoming premier of the province. You know?
Just on for personal enjoyment, like if she's a fan of Mr. Carlson. I mean, Premier Smith's not afraid of sitting down with much of anybody. I mean, people can complain about a lot of things, but she's been extremely accessible. I mean, she sat down with the Pembina Institute.
Yeah.
If I was the Premier of Alberta, you wouldn't be able to drag me into your rotten room, you guys.
And she answers questions from the Rebel and True North and and counter signal. I mean, those guys aren't even allowed inside Jody Gondek's press conference, but they're at the top of the line to ask questions on Saturday at her press conference, and she answered them all. And she's not afraid of anybody. And she's not going to be starstruck by Tucker Carlson. She may enjoy meeting him, but
if there's any giving and getting, she's going to give as good as she gets.
Exactly, and I'm sure it'll be an entertaining afternoon.
Get away with anything, but talk about what is his 4 things? What is it? The sworn enemy, lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink.
Well, if it's the pomposity and smugness, then I can see why Andrew Coyne doesn't like him instinctively. That's personified 2 of the 4 things that Mr. Carlson stands against. But he's a polarizing figure. I mean, even among conservatives, there's some love-hate going on with Tucker Carlson. Is it a bit of a gamble, though, for Premier Smith sitting down with him? Is there much to be gained? I mean, I know she'll enjoy it, but she's always now in her role has to weigh the bigger picture of some of the stuff she does.
I'll bet you that if you had been in a position to take a poll of that 3,900 people, it's actually more than 3,700. They published the final figure, and I think it was 3,972. Anyway, if you could have taken a poll of that room, that it's just a bet, but I reckon that Tucker Carlson would have been, media favorite for just about all of them. Be a few who weren't, but
in that room. But
it's not a risk to her base.
Her base is going to love the fact that she sits down with Carlson.
As much as the squirrels will be out there protesting outside of the center probably, and they'll be screaming bloody murder, your average Albertan voter will have long forgotten it within 4 or 5 weeks of the event anyways. And
that's the other thing. If you're thinking of going for dinner afterwards, make your reservation now.
Well, I'll be out of the country for it. I was kind of bummed when I saw the date.
Oh, no. Where are you going?
I went on Arizona for a few weeks.
Change your plans.
Hey, did you know you're guest hosting the show for 3 weeks?
By the way,
this is how some have greatness. Some are born to it, and some have it thrust upon them.
Something like that.
Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll work on that contingency as the time nears. Yes.
Yeah, but it's the usual negative Nellies, instantly condemning something, and it's the negative Nellies and the left-wing media instantly condemning something. I don't see any.
What else are they going to say?
Exactly. I mean, every time the Premier speaks publicly, there's a risk. It doesn't matter who it's to. If she slips up and says something stupid, she's going to get crucified for it. And if she slips up and says something stupid with Tucker Carlson, I can promise you we'll crucify her.
Oh, yeah.
But the left-wing media will be doing it much happier than we are.
Well, that's some of it. I mean, I think part of what Carlson symbolizes or signifies for our legacy media members and why the Globe and Ms. Kreiderman got so upset, he broke away from legacy. He had his show. He was on Fox. He had his millions of viewers on there. Yeah, he didn't break away willingly. He was fired. But he resurfaced and is doing better than he's ever done before. I mean, the viewership is off the charts now. He's made an example showing, you know what? We don't need those old dinosaurs. We don't need those institutions. We can actually go to modern means of communicating to people now and get the messaging out. And I think that scares a lot in the establishment. I mean, it frightens them. They're in an industry, as you guys would know, you were in it before as well, that's just not going back to where it was.
When you talk about old dinosaurs, I was just thinking about that press conference, and I was thinking to myself, my word, I'm 75 and I'm still there. And then up walks Don Braid, who's 80, and Stuart from the Edmonton Journal, and I don't know. And then if you look around the room, who's standing behind Danielle Smith, but some people of our demographic and our age. We were speaking about Dr. Cowell earlier. We were speaking of Dr. Denning, of Jim Denning and Lyle Wilbert.
They can't put us out to rest.
But there's both and guiding as well. I mean, we had young Jonathan Bradley in line who put his questions forward to Premier Smith. And that was one more thing, actually, kind of going back to the convention. I saw, and I've been doing a lot of them, and that's something we always decry as conservatives, not enough youth there. There was a fair amount, actually, of younger people evident at that AGM. I was quite happily surprised to see it.
And that would probably have been their first political experience. They probably joined up just to come to the AGM.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great. It's great that they're there in the room for the plenary sessions, but man, you can't get near the bar afterwards.
No, that is a problem.
Well, it's the very much younger ones. Yeah, I'm speaking even people. I mean, in conservative meetings, sometimes you're lucky to have the average sitting below 60. You know, with the old reform meetings, that was kind of the reality. I know as a young reformer, and
It was fairly outrageous that they only offered Anheuser-Busch products, except for maybe one.
Well, there was that one
local
local craft brew, and that was really good, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, for obvious reasons, that's what I chose, and it turned out to be, you know, you find out something good just by accident.
Yeah. And I noticed
what the name of it was?
no, I don't.
Cory wasn't there on Friday. You had to play the role of Cory, buying women, pretty women, glasses of wine, and
Well,
it was a thing of beauty to watch.
You're just out to get us to do it with our significant others.
I mean, our own Jen Hodson, why would you not?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That was
Exactly.
good. And by the way, I would buy one for Kelly Cradman too. I know
Absolutely.
we've used her name in vain a couple of times here, but she was a tremendous colleague with the Calgary
She's
Herald
written
years
some
ago.
great stuff.
She is a good reporter.
She's a lovely lady and a good
and
reporter.
a good reporter. So
Yes, but I still like swiping at the legacy media when I can. If she wants to reestablish, there's some great independent outlets she could land within, perhaps, if she was moving along. The only other critique I had there was a lack of coffee, and I appreciate you going out to find some, because those of us that need that regular caffeine, that was. I heard that from a number of people. Where can I get a coffee?
yeah, well, you know how far I had to. I had to actually break into the craft show up the corridor, and I explained the situation, and they said, "Well, all right, you can go to where we're selling coffee. It's way down there, but you're not to look at any of the booths."
Eyes front.
Nice front.
Get some crafted blinders on you there.
I tell you.
Well, it was still aside
And
from
thanks
that.
also to Christine Cusinelli, who came on and helped me carry the little back. You guys drink a lot of coffee.
Well,
Actually, I don't.
and I
Well,
guess
I got
just,
you tea.
You got me
got you
tea.
tea.
That was all right.
I'll close out with one thumbs up to that poor beleaguered pair of security guys who kept trying to stop people from entering through the exit doors, watching him
Exactly.
doggedly trying to keep those conservative, stubborn folks in order.
And I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but this is our last show before Remembrance Day.
Yes.
So I think we would be remiss without saying God bless all the veterans, and let's remember the fallen on Saturday at the 11th hour of the 11th day. And we're only able to do these type of shows because of the sacrifice they made. So God bless them all.
No,
Came at a
that's
cost.
a perfect way to close out the show. We're wrapping up right now. So yes, to those veterans still out there, thank you for your service, and you'll have nothing but my appreciation for those who have already passed. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. Well, we covered a lot today. We'll cover a lot more next week. So be sure to tune in then, and I'll get out there to one of those Remembrance Day services. Thanks.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year.